and welcome to SoulWhat, a Soultopia podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Welch, with our producer, Matt Stoker.
And I'm Roger Welch. So what's up today, Michelle?
Well, I'm really excited about our show today. Our guest I have known for longer than either one of us want to admit. No, longer than I want to admit. And I very much look up to Jan Langbein. She is the Chief Executive Officer at Genesis Women's Shelter. And for 29 years, Jan has been an activist in efforts to end violence against women. Currently, as CEO of Genesis Women's Shelter and Support, Ms. Langbein oversees Genesis' internal and external operations, as well as funding and community education. Recognized as a national, I'd say international, expert on the dynamics and effects of domestic violence, Ms. Langbein conducts training, keynote, and workshop programs for numerous local, state, and national conferences, social and civic organizations, and corporations. She provides expert testimony in court cases and trains law enforcement and prosecutorial, I should know how to say that, professionals to enhance their efforts to end violence against women. In partnership with the Dallas Police Department and the FBI, Ms. Langbein co-founded the annual International Conference on Crimes Against Women with advanced practices of investigation and prosecution, bringing together law enforcement, advocates, prosecutors, and forensic health professionals. Under Ms. Langbein's leadership, Genesis has grown, and I remember this, from a 7-room emergency room shelter to a full-service response for victims of domestic violence. Genesis Women's Shelter and Support provides a continuum of care, which includes expanded shelter services, transitional housing, daycare, an on-site school, access to civil legal representation, job readiness programming, ESL education, advocacy, and counseling at the residential and non-residential facilities. Genesis is unique as one of the few victim services programs in the country that accomplishes sustainability without government funding. Since its inception, Genesis has not only developed services of excellence, but also innovative programs and funding sources. The organization and success of this model program has been shared statewide to other NGOs. In 2009, Ms. Langbein concluded a presidential appointment as Senior Policy Advisor to the Director of the United States Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women. As Senior Policy Advisor, Ms. Langbein served as Chief Strategist of the OVW, which is the Office on Violence Against Women. On behalf of the director, she guided and evaluated program and administrative processes and worked to implement standards and protocols for internal and external operations. She supported the ongoing efforts with OVW for policy issues regarding the implementation of the Violence Against Women Act. Her extensive professional affiliations include, and you guys listen to this, board, advisory, and committee positions with the Texas Council on Family Violence Prevention Council, Dallas County Family Violence Task Force, Family Violence Coalition, Dallas Mayor's Task Force on Domestic Violence, Greater Dallas Injury Prevention Center, and the North Texas Food Bank. She is the recipient of numerous awards for her leadership in community service, including the FBI Director's Community Leadership Award, Mosaic Family Services Champion of Human Rights Award, the Harriman, you can correct that later, Community Leadership Award, the Mara Award, Woman of Distinction Award, the Women's Advocacy Award, the Southern Methodist University Profiles in Leadership Award, the George Washington Honorary Medal Peacemakers, Dallas Peace Patron Award, and the Dallas Bar Association Liberty Bell Award. I happened to watch today I'm not sure which one it was, but I watched Laura Bush giving her an award at the Laura Bush Museum, at the Bush Museum, President Bush Museum, and you'll have to tell us about that, Jan. And Miss Langbein has been qualified for expert testimony in Dallas, Collin, Tarrant, and Ellis counties for civil, criminal, misdemeanor, and felony proceedings, and has provided expert testimony in immigration cases as well as court-martials at Fort Hood and Lackland Air Force Base. Wow. Welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, that's exhausting just listening to it. I just...
Well, it's impressive, and I'll tell you what, anyone who knows you knows that you've probably done about 20 times, 50 times more than that I just read, right?
Well, I don't know about that, but the interest here tonight is more about Genesis and what we do there instead of, what I've done or lived long enough to tell about, I guess is a better way to say it.
I think that let's start there, because I was reading today. I wanted you to tell us a little bit about Genesis for those who, and how you got involved. I know that we kind of met that second year of Genesis when you became, I believe, the chief executive officer, maybe the second year of Genesis. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but you were there from inception, weren't you?
Actually, had been there about 5 years before I got there. Yeah, and we met just a couple of years after that. But Genesis is now today a full service response for women and children who are victims of domestic violence. And what started, as you said, with a very small, just emergency shelter has grown into full service response with residential, non-residential services, a legal clinic, a school on site, child care, child development, preschool on site. And that sounds like a lot, but it's been 30 years in the making. So it's a lot of uphill climbing. And, but we've, I don't know that, Michelle, I'm not smart, but I definitely am smart enough to hire the smartest people I know. So I need to give snaps to all the people over the years that have made possible the most incredible place that is welcoming, that is trauma-informed, that has made a difference in just thousands and thousands of women and children's lives. In addition to providing those services, the rest of our mission statement says to raise the awareness regarding the pervasiveness and the effects of domestic violence. And so that is where we come with the Conference on Crimes Against Women. Or today I taught a recruit class 374 at the Dallas Police Academy on, the dynamics of domestic violence. And so every chance we get, we're talking about it. So I want to say thank you for inviting me here tonight to be able to talk some more about it.
Well,
So how did you get involved with Genesis in the beginning? I mean, that's...
That's a great question. I am not from abuse. And a lot of times people think, well, what do you know about it? Or why is this your thing? Why is this your field of fascination? Or why is this the fire in your belly? And there's really no rhyme or reason to it. I lost my mom to breast cancer when she was young. I was young. Everybody was young. And I wonder sometimes why I am not out racing for the cure, but I'm not. I actually started as a volunteer at Genesis. Michelle knows exactly the position I had because she had it several years after I did, but it was project chair for the Junior League of Dallas. And I didn't really think about abuse. Again, I'm not from it. I didn't know at that time that I knew people who had suffered from violence in the home. And so I was actually, it's kind of just, I'll make a long story short, but I had, the Junior League of Dallas requires, it's a membership organization where you do so many volunteer hours every week or month or year or whatever. And I had a a placement that I wasn't very excited about. And, I thought, well, next year I'm going to look for the easy way out. And I tell these young junior leaguers now that, here's a pearl of wisdom. If you want to make God laugh, just look for the easy way out of life. It doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. Anyway, so I had decided I would sign up for this easy way out, and I'm on my way down Lover's Lane to do it back before online everything. And I stopped in a nail salon. Actually, I had broken one of my little junior league acrylic fingernails, and I decided I want to do good in the community, but I think my nails ought to look nice. So I had a seat and I'm waiting to get this nail fixed. I was kind of in a hurry because I thought I need to get there before my lazy girlfriends, sign up for it and fill it up. And while I was sitting there, literally a magazine just sort of slid in my lap and said, every 9 seconds a woman is assaulted in her home. And 1 out of every 3 women will know domestic violence on an ongoing basis. And I remember thinking, you have got to be kidding. Well, it's nobody who lives near me or looks like me or is a member of the Junior League of Dallas. But I went on to read this article, and it was a professional couple. I think she was a lawyer and he a dentist, or vice versa. And he beat her because dinner was late. And to be real honest, I was just offended. I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. And I did get my nail fixed, but by the time I got to Junior League, I had forgotten all about the easy way out. Mm-hmm. And I opened the brochure to violence intervention, and I stuck my finger down on Genesis. I'd never heard of Genesis, but off I went. And I got there and I thought, somehow these women will look differently than I do, and their children won't look like mine. But what I found was that domestic violence is an equal opportunity epidemic. It happens in the most affluent parts of our community and the poorest parts of our community. The dynamics are the same. The cycle is the same. And what I remember doing is literally just rolling up my sleeves and doing whatever they needed to do. I made the Kool-Aid. I answered the hotline. I rocked babies while mom was, up taking a shower. It was just amazing. And after about 3 years of being a volunteer, and then I was project chair for the Junior League, the board came basically and said, we need new leadership. And out of my mouth shoots, oh my gosh, I think that's me. And at that time, the job description, I'd never worked outside the home. I had never read a big financial statement. I'd never hired. I'd never fired. But they said she needs to be able to work the crowd and raise money. And I thought, well, you know what, I can do that. And so here I am 30 years later. I did top out 30 years last month. Mm-hmm. And I have never looked back. I have never questioned that decision. I've been late for carpool, and I've missed a lot of stuff that I should be doing, or, dinner is certainly late at my house if there is dinner that we don't pick up on the way home. But as far as being able to say on the phone, grab your babies and come on, we've got a safe place for you. I've got the dream job, guys. I really do. Mm-hmm. I am blessed. I am blessed beyond words to be able to be in someone's life at the darkest time and just walk beside them and toward the light. So that's what I get to do.
Tell us a little bit about, you mentioned a little bit about the different demographics, and mm-hmm. I don't think that this can be said enough. I don't think people can hear it enough about just what domestic violence is, and what, even a question that I received was, and it's further down in my questions, but let's just address it now, what domestic violence includes,
right? And
what those demographics are, maybe the stats, a few of the stats on that right now. I hate to call it stats because these are people, these are lives that we're dealing with. But what does that look like right now?
The studies tell us that, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if I mentioned it here, 3 other places I've just spoken to, but every 9 seconds a woman is assaulted in her own home. And, in the hour that we're here talking about it, that's 350, 360 moms and daughters and sisters and best friends and coworkers who will be assaulted by someone who tells her that he loves her, by someone who tells her it's her fault, and by someone who tries to tell the rest of us it's none of our business. Well, it is my business. It should be your business too. This is not something that can be left on the steps of City Hall or Genesis or the police department. We as human beings, human beings need to be able to turn each to the other and say, I'm scared for you, but there is help and there is hope, and here's a phone number. And so domestic violence is actually the leading cause of injury to women in the United States. And if we know that, I don't know how you turn your back on that. I think we all have an obligation to make a difference, to do what we can with what we have. So let's talk about what is domestic violence. What is violence? You will hear me refer to she as the victim and he as the perpetrator. And there's a couple of reasons for that. At Genesis, we only work with women and their children, women regardless of the gender of their abuser, but we do not provide services to men who are battered, men who batter. And so we do know there are men who are abused. The information is the same. Men are abused by women, men are abused by same gender partners, but the majority of women majority of the victims are women, and the severity is usually much greater when the woman is the victim. So when we think about domestic violence, I think a lot of people believe it's a push, it's a slap, it's a shove, it's a burn, it's a cut, and they believe that's what domestic violence is. But it is absolutely so much more than that. It's not about a fight that got out of control. It is about power and control. Domestic violence is where one person in the home wants to have power and control over another person. And in order to keep that balance, there is many tools of the trade, as it turns out. And certainly physical is one of them. The physical abuse that is against the law, we see that, but we also see many other kinds of abuse. We see verbal and emotional. And I got to tell you, that can be as deadly to a woman's psyche, to a woman's heart, as the actual push and slap and shove that women who experience the verbal and, the gaslighting. And I'm told over and over again, I'm stupid and I'm fat and I'm ugly and no one else will have you. You're a lousy mother, you're a drunk, you're whatever it is, whatever is important to me. That's what the choice of weapon that he will use. But there's also financial abuse. We see what you would think are very wealthy women come to Genesis, but all the houses and all the assets are in his name. The house is in his name. The cars are in his name. The stock portfolio, the house in Aspen, is all in his name. And maybe the money that my mom sent me that I hid in the bottom of the cereal box, now he's found that and I have nothing. I have no credit card. I have no way out. People think, why don't you just get out? And I think, well, where would I go? Well, go to a hotel at least for a night. Well, I have no credit card. I have no money. Couldn't even pay cash. And do I want to drag my kids out of their beds in the middle of the night to do that? We also know that spiritual abuse is very, very common. Again, the God of my faith and my faith community is very important to me. And if I thought either one would turn their back on me, but I don't know if that's a hurdle I could jump, but we see many women or hear many women call in and say, I went to my pastor and he said, go home and read Ephesians 5, or my husband tells me I'm not a Proverbs 31 wife, or in Judaism, there's a phrase called shalom bayit, which I've heard Jewish women say, if he beats me and I tell I've broken shalom bayit, which means peace in the home. And so many, many times it's spiritual abuse, it's physical abuse, it's sexual abuse. We've even heard this last year, how abusers will use COVID as a choice of weapon, either coughing in her face or not allowing her to wear a mask when she goes to the grocery store, making her wash her hands until they bleed. And so I don't know, I guess any old excuse will do. And unfortunately, we as a society have not figured out how to get him to stop that behavior. So it's not just one, it's a lot of different types of abuse, but it is all surrounding power and control.
I have a follow-up question on that. As far as you mentioned, you kind of had a caveat there with, you said the physical is legal. How much of
it's
the
illegal?
Excuse me.
Illegal.
Thank you. Is illegal. But how many inroads have been made into? I know you guys at Genesis do so much to affect law, legislation. How much has been done in say in the past 30 years.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's day and night. I mean, in my married lifetime, Michelle, there were no laws against marital rape. And marital rape is not about, I'm just not in the mood tonight. It's about power and control. It's like stranger on stranger rape. It's but unfortunately, when my rapist is my husband, he can jump out of the bushes anytime he wants. We have made great strides. Now, I got to tell you, we've burned a lot of lingerie in Austin and a lot of lingerie in Washington to get the job. And I want to say done. It's not done. We still have lots to do, but to recognize strangulation as a felony was a huge win for us. To pass legislation that is supposedly removes firearms from the hands of, and this happened 20 years ago, remove firearms from the hands of abusers, those convicted of domestic violence crimes or those who are subject of protective orders. Step by step, we have made strides, but yet it feels like every time we make one forward, we take a couple back. And it depends so much on the temperature or the what's going on in Austin and in Washington. Right. Like who's running the show? I guess that's a better way to say it. Who's running the show? Because we just can't seem to agree on a lot of things. I don't know how. I don't know how we would disagree on ending violence in the home. It's a crime that impacts so many other crimes. There is definitely an intersection between domestic violence and mass shooting. There is an intersection between domestic violence and human trafficking. 98% of young girls walking Harry Hines tonight grew up in a violent home. How bad is it at home that they would rather be on, Harry Hines walking for some disgusting pimp who prostitutes her? 99% of the pimps grew up in a violent home. I don't know what to say about the people who buy these children because I think they probably just need to die. I don't know. But it intersects so many places. When I train up a young therapist, I say, I don't know what clinical work you want to do, whether it's drugs and alcohol or teen pregnancies or, depression or whatever you want to do. I can tell you domestic violence weaves its way through that. Children who are raised in a violent home receive on-the-job training to become victims and to become abusers. And so we know that if we could, in fact, 85% of all men in Texas prisons actually grew up in a violent home. Now, they're not there because they beat their wife, because unfortunately most guys who beat their wives don't go to prison. Correct. But they're there because they sold drugs or they, stole a car, they robbed you or robbed your home. But that I feel strongly that's not where they learned it. It was learned in the home and spilled out into the street. So we could solve a lot of issues, a lot of crime if we would address the violence in the home.
All right.
So y'all have a lot of services that you offer, from emergency shelter, counseling,
Right.
and you offer to, women and to their children. But over the 30 years you've been there, just really and truly, how much growth? I mean, like, obviously it's not like you got a couple of little rooms where people can stay. I mean, you've got like tons of growth over the years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We started, as I say, with a 7-bedroom shelter, and we realized pretty quickly that the demand was greater than we were supplying. So we doubled the size of that. It wasn't long before we realized that an 8-week stay in the shelter wasn't nearly long enough. And so we built long-term transitional housing on our safe campus where someone can stay, a family can stay in an apartment for up to a year. And by the way, all our services are no cost, no strings attached. But we also know that only about 7% of the battered population will ever seek shelter for whatever reason, that they won't come to a shelter. So for that 93% of victims of violence, we have our non-residential counseling center for those moms and kids who either they've either have not left the relationship yet, or they've left and they have other residential resources. That's actually our biggest footprint. We probably do 18,000, 20,000 counseling hours a year at that non-residential center. And we just signed a lease and we were just painting last weekend on our Genesis non-residential counseling center 2.0. We're opening an office in southern Dallas where the need is great and the resources were zero. And so I'm very proud of taking our services to places that underserved communities will have the chance to access. So yeah, it's just one thing on top of the other. And again, when I started, I didn't have some big master plan. I just kept looking at roadblocks, like she can't get a job if she doesn't have childcare, and she can't get, so we put childcare on site, or, she can't, get a protective order or get a divorce or have custody of her children if she can't afford legal help. And so we put civil legal help on site. And so it was just a process really of looking up and seeing what's keeping her from being successful in her walk toward an abuse-free life. And what we do is find a solution, find a way to pay for it, and do it.
Is what you just mentioned, is that part of your capital campaign? Are you still?
No.
Okay.
No, it's operational. We know from studies that African American women are assaulted 35% more than white women. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that more Black men are violent. It means that they assault more often, and but they also are probably our least demographic as far as coming to our services. And certainly there are myths that surround the experience of Black women, that shelters are only for white women, or you don't serve people south of I-30, or that somehow they're at fault because they fought back. That's another thing that I've learned, that and that may be cultural. I think if somebody were hitting me, I think I would just curl up in a ball and wait till it was over. But a lot of women are convinced that they too have committed domestic violence because they did fight back. And that's just self-defense.
Yeah.
So we're excited about having a presence in a place where clients feel like they relate, feel like they can access without, an hour and a half of transportation. I know, Michelle, I think it's going to be very advocacy driven at first. I don't think any woman could commit to a in-depth counseling process if in fact she can't feed her kids that night, or they don't have shoes for school the next day or something. So I think a lot of that will be happening right at first. The very storefront of that counseling center is actually going to be a small benefit thrift store. Number one, I hope it pays the rent. And number two, I think it's a good sort of disguise, and number three, a good resource for women coming to the center. So I'm very excited, and hopefully that'll be open in the next 60 days.
Yeah, hey, I know where you can get all that stuff and move it then.
No, one of the best stories I have about Jan, you remember we were walking out of Target that night, and I said about the bicycle. I would go to these luncheons, and Jan, you brought up this bicycle that somebody gave one time. You said, now if your children who get nice toys every Christmas, they get a bicycle with a seat on it. Do not bring me a child who's been battered, who's been watched her mother beaten or his mother beaten. Maybe he's been beaten. Chances are he's been beaten. And you're bringing him a bicycle without a seat on it. Don't do
what that looks like? It's a skewer. I mean, it's like, who skewers kids? Anyway, I think people think, well, and this particular donor said, well, isn't that better than nothing? I'm like, well, it's really not.
No, it's not. Go buy a new one. So we had that conversation, didn't we? Yep. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned COVID. We've heard a lot here and there, and I don't know if it's speculation. Has the rate of domestic violence gone up during COVID? Have you seen that? Okay.
Yes, I absolutely believe it has. Now, we're not far enough out of it to really have backup data for that, but I can tell you that when COVID hit and we didn't have any direction of how bad it was or what it's going to be or whatever, but they started locking down people. You remember there was a time where we weren't supposed to go out at all unless you're a first responder. Well, that means that a victim is actually quarantined with her abuser, and there's no way for her to ask for help with him in the next room. Plus, tensions are higher. You need to keep those kids quiet. You're driving me crazy. Or he, just picks at them more. She gets no relief, like even going to the grocery store, right? So we know that we have seen an increase in femicide, fatality of women who are victims of family violence. And we know that for a fact. And so our hotline numbers actually went down because they were not calling. But then as soon as the all clear-ish bell sounded, we have just been inundated.
Well, let's talk to some people for a second that still don't get it.
Okay.
Because after all this time, I would think people would get it. Are they getting it more? And what I mean by that, do you know what I'm about to ask you?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
What they still don't get it. They still will ask me, why don't they leave? And it started with me at the DA's office. To keep this story short, it was the same time I was in junior league, I believe, and and I don't know what they do now, but we were almost taught to get angry because, somebody would file a case, a woman would file a case, and then she would, of course, not want to follow through. And so we were made to put them on the stand and make them take the fifth, and they'd have to go through all the questions and say, to basically a CYA, I guess, for, the DA's office. And I'm not sure what they do now or anything, because that was 100 years ago, right? Or it feels like it to me. I was a baby, 24, doing this case, and they'd say, put her up there, and you feel horrible because she's scared to death and doesn't want to be on the stand. She wants to drop the case. And of course the DAs are they're kind of angry because they worked on this case, and I wasn't angry. And then I started getting education from you and going to Genesis. And so, but you get these questions, why? And I would like you to explain to people first of all, how to help your friends and family. And we will give the number. I have it in my phone. And I know at a luncheon one time you said, get out your phones right now and put this number in your phone. You probably do it every time, but I have it in my phone. And the people who get frustrated. I've had friends recently, I've had people I know, and I'll give them numbers, and I know not to get mad. I've learned that. I can't get mad if they don't leave.
How can you be mad at her?
But
what does that even mean, get mad at her?
But do you see it from people? Do you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm asked every day, why doesn't she just get out? And then usually that's followed by, boy, oh boy, if that were me, I sure would. Well, would you or would you not? I don't know. There are a lot of reasons why they don't leave. They understand. They're the experts on how safe they are. And they don't do it like this now. But if they... to put her on the stand and humiliate her, and I understand it's frustrating. You worked on this case and she wants to drop the charges. Well, why do you think she wants to drop the charges?
Exactly.
Right? Right? It's because he said you get down there or you'll be sorry. Or he's the breadwinner, and if he loses his job, there are no baby Pampers for the baby or food on the table, period. And so there are a lot of reasons she doesn't want to testify because it's just going to make it worse. Let me tell you, if you're in a misdemeanor court and you testify and he has been in jail, when they finally decide it's a misdemeanor C, then he's probably going to get out. He'll walk out of that courtroom because of time served previously. So imagine standing up there telling the worst secrets of your life, blaming it all on him, and then you walk out with him. What do you think is going to happen when you get home? You're going to get a whipping of your life. And that's the truth. I think we are so quick to judge, why doesn't she this or why doesn't she that? I heard a guy, there's a doctor, I can't think of his name. I'll try to think it up before we leave. But anyway, he works with abusers. And he said, to expect a woman to fix it, to cure it, is like asking a woman with the flu, just giving her tons more Kleenex. Well, it cleans up the mess, but it doesn't cure the flu. I mean, he kind of made that analogy.
Right.
Why do we expect somebody with COVID to solve COVID? Why do we expect someone against whom a crime is committed to solve that crime? And yet we do. I don't know if you remember when you were in the DA's office, Cindy Dyer. Was she there when you were there?
Yes.
Okay,
well, I remember that name, I think.
A star.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was the first ADA in the state of Texas to try a case without the witness. And if you think about it, in a homicide case, there is no witness. And so
Right.
you really don't need one. I mean, you've got the police report, and now we're doing this lethality assessment. All patrol officers are doing an assessment form. You've got that. You've got, expert testimony from the local battered women's shelter.
That's
There's
right.
many ways. You don't have to put her on the stand. Let her say he never did it. Let her say, because that's safety planning for her. I was training, as I mentioned, these young patrol officers this morning, and they're out in the police academy in this classroom, and there's just one door. And so I always ask them to that. I said, where is the safest place that if a fire-breathing dragon comes into this room intent on killing everybody, where is the safest place to stand, right? What would you say, Michelle? What would you say? Where is the safest place to stand if a fire-breathing dragon comes into that studio?
I don't know. Bathroom, probably, but I'm thinking tornadoes. Near the window, bathroom. I don't know. I'm feeling stupid.
No.
The bathroom.
Well, no. See, that's just it. Nobody really does understand it. Actually, the safest place for someone who doesn't want to get, killed by this, this fire coming out of this dragon's mouth is right beside the dragon. It's everybody out in front of that's going to be hurt.
Oh, well, duh. Yeah. Oh, now I feel stupid.
No duh to it. I mean, it took me 15 years to figure this one out, but that's what she will do. She will sidle up next to him. That's a Texas expression for you international listeners. She's going to sidle up next to him and let him know, I don't know why these police officers came out here. That nosy neighbor must have called them. I would never do it. You're the king of the castle. I wouldn't press I'm going to go down there and drop those charges. Well, that's why, because she is in danger of being consumed by that fire. There's another theory called the shark fin theory. Shark fin theory is, as long as I know, if I can see the fin, I know where he is. And so when somebody says, I can't believe you had dinner with him, or I can't believe you let the children stay over for the weekend. Really? Quit judging the victim and start shifting the blame to the perpetrator. And so basically, as long as she knows where he is, she doesn't have to worry about him circling around, when she doesn't know, when she's most vulnerable, I guess is the way to say it. So I remember there was a newspaper article, and I know you have more questions, but there was this series of newspaper headlines that said, John beat Mary because dinner was late. And the next day it said, Mary was beaten because dinner was late. And then it said, Mary was beaten. And then it said, Mary is a battered woman. So first of all, where's John in this whole thing, right? The guy who did it. And now Mary is defined as what happened to her. Not who she is, but she has become a battered woman, and is defined by what his actions did to her. I don't know why I got off on that.
No, but no, that makes sense, and it does happen. And you also said something that, for me, I don't know if you got my I can't go into it, but I called you. It was a crazy, Michelle was losing her mind, crazy crying phone call not too long ago, and you didn't call me back because you probably thought she's lost her mind and she'll get hold of it in a few minutes. But and it was because I was not frustrated with a friend, someone, ex. I was frustrated with the courts a little bit.
Yes.
It was actually an attorney, and she was being honest about what was going on. And I also made a couple phone calls to whomever I could. Like, what the heck? It's been this many years, and we have, the Conference on Crimes Against Women. I've been to that. I know what they teach at that. They were teaching that 10 years ago. I went to this. I mean, what does this take? And I was so... was I not crazy?
Yeah.
I was a little bit losing my mind. And,
well, that's where you ought to lose your marbles. Not mad at her, but mad at the system that doesn't protect her.
I was so mad because she was basically told everything that had happened. This, without going into details, this is a million times this happens, we know. Then they're told the one little thing that, well, that for that 1 second, maybe you left them alone with him. Why'd you do that? And how close did his fist come to you or whatever? And I'm thinking, oh my God. And so my question to you is, I know you feel like you've made and you have made all this progress. Where do you feel, how do you feel about when they say this? And this is the tough question. When they say, well, women sometimes in divorce cases lie. And so that it's the crying the wolf. It's the same as like women who are raped, and then the women who, you know where I'm going with this, who really are raped. Women are really raped, and then somebody else says they're raped,
Right.
and they're not. So they heard
Right.
it for everybody else. Do you see a lot of that? Are you getting a lot of pushback? I don't think courts are going to stand up to Jan Langbein, but I know it's still going on with some of the judges and the courts, and you're
No
hearing
doubt
things
about it.
like
No doubt
that.
about it. And I feel like just when I get the judges raised up right, they lose their seat on the bench. So I start all over again. I think the other day I was visiting with the new Dallas police chief, and I thought, I think I've taken to raise about, and that's another Texas expression, I've taken to raise about, I don't know, 5 chiefs of police. And I feel like I'm starting all over again. But with that said, we have made progress. And, again, with laws, and if it takes sitting in the courtroom with a big old, clipboard and taking notes, we're voters. We voted them in, we can vote them back out again.
That's right.
But I think it does get frustrating. It gets super frustrating about judges who think, well, she must like it, or she would have gotten out, or, they do lie. Let me tell you, lying about a rape is so horrible that nobody with their right mind would want to do it.
Right.
I mean, get a rape kit done to do it, to talk disgusting details to the patrol officer, and then in comes a detective, and then in comes a sane nurse, and then you're sitting on a stand somewhere. Do you know how hard it is to lie about it? More people lie to insurance companies that on damage on their car that didn't happen, then they lie about this. We need to be considering not who's lying, but who isn't reporting, because they're going to be called liars, right? You go through this kind of trauma and you do get a little crazy. You act like anybody would if they were assaulted like that. If what would a man act like if he was sodomized? I mean, it wouldn't just be a walk in the park, right? And so the response to the trauma is often mistaken for a lack of credibility. Maybe she has a flat affect. Maybe she's, can't answer the questions. Maybe the story is one way 1 minute and another way the next minute. Well, that's just the way your brain has processed what you've been through. The brain that we know when you're experiencing a trauma, the hippocampus disconnects and you're running on your amygdala, which is fight, flight, freeze, or appease. And so your memory is in that part that has been disconnected. It may take a couple of days for that to reconnect. And then I'm being hammered with questions. Was it a Coke bottle? Was it a Coke can? Honest to God, I don't know. I don't remember what it was. And then other people make the judgment call of, well, I think if I got something thrown at my head that cut my face, I would know if it was a bottle or a can. Well, maybe you would, maybe you won't. But I think we've got to stop holding the victim accountable. Only in domestic violence and sexual assault is the victim held accountable.
Absolutely.
And I think the other thing is going to be that we as a society are going to have to stand up and say enough is enough. We're going to have to say, you know what? I don't do a business deal with you. I wouldn't bring an abuser on your podcast. I think we all need to draw this line in the sand to say, I'm not going to play golf with you. I don't think those jokes are funny. Like, if you guys were out with another couple having dinner or something, couple of your friends, and, some guy tells a joke using the N-word, I would imagine, knowing you, Michelle, as well as I do, that you both would say, hey, that wasn't funny, and I don't appreciate you talking like that. That's not something I want to be around.
Correct.
Well, when your buddy tells some misogynistic, disgusting joke and then acts like it's locker room talk, you can grab them by their what, and it's locker room talk. Well, you know what? I don't think that's funny. I don't laugh at it, and I don't to God, don't vote for somebody who thinks it's locker room talk.
I
So
agree.
anyway,
What do you suggest so what I would do with this friend is I tell this hypothetical friend, Minnie, people who come in my stores, things like that, who share things. I tell them about Genesis. We have Genesis number here, always. I've given it out many times, but I also tell the ones that say I'm not doing anything, I always say, I'm here for you.
Yes,
And
that's it.
that's what I do. Is that what you
Yeah.
say to?
Yes, this may not be a good time. This may not be a good time for several reasons, but I just want you to know that you're the expert, and I'm going to be here for you, and I'm not going to give up on you. And even though someone is probably telling you that nobody's going to hear you, believe you, or help you, that's exactly what I am here to do. I tell prosecutors, you were talking about dropping the charges, and the appropriate response for a prosecutor is, I completely understand why you're doing it. And when you are ready to try it again, to hold them accountable, I'm going to be here, and you can call my cell phone anytime you want. I think that's what friends need to hear.
Yeah.
They don't need to hear, look, I've heard phrases like, first time, shame on him, second time, shame on you. And I'm like, okay, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
I think, again, we need to quit judging the victim of these crimes.
I totally agree. And it's so sad to me that it hasn't come. I mean, as much as we do, it's how even we treat our friends, because I was treated that way all the way back even in high school. Where a friend just said, well, I'm not talking to you anymore if you're going to let that boy keep hitting you and kept pushing you in the hall. And I had a history teacher tell me the same thing. I'm going to send you to the principal's office if I hear about it again. And blah, 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 blah,
you
blah.
go to the principal's office, because
but not the guy, so it goes on, and you hear that, but I just wanted people listening to know this is how you respond. You respond with love, and you respond and let them know that you love them, you're there for them, and when they're ready.
Be non-judgmental, to say that there is help and hope. You don't have to be a social worker. All you have to know is 214-946-HELP, and we'll take it from there. But I think, again, when somebody says, I'm not going to hang out with you if you don't stop it, that's what he's counting on. He wants you to be removed from your friends and, have the principal think it's your fault, or the history teacher think it's your fault. So we are bringing to fruition, we're actually aiding and abetting the abuser, I guess, when we say things like that. And sometimes we're wrong. I think another thing is, we think, oh, if a friend came and told me about that. But what about the person who you're afraid that it's going on and she doesn't tell you? Well, I think we have an obligation to ask, and it can be done in a lot of ways. I heard this lady on this podcast last night that said 1 out of every 3 people, do you ever think that could happen to you? And then you just kind of wait and see what she says. Or, maybe if you have a different relationship with the person, you can say, oh my gosh, what is going on? I'm scared for you. I've seen changes. Now, she might say, you need to shut up and get out of my life. My business is my business. And that's okay. But let's say if she had breast cancer, she was diagnosed with breast cancer and didn't do anything about it, would you just say, hey, I'm not going to be your friend anymore if you don't go get that fixed? Or if she has an eating disorder or diabetes, and when you just keep saying, I'm scared for you, I'm worried about you, I'll go to the doctor with you, I'll stand beside you, whatever the diagnosis is. But there is help and there's hope. But for some reason, we seem to need this to be on our own time schedule.
Right. And I do think it's important what you said. I'm there for you to take you to the experts. We aren't the experts, but I'm there for you to take you to, and we have the resources for them. I do have. I'm sorry, I'm taking over. I'm so excited. Do you think that a weekend or 2 of anger management works?
Oh my gosh! Now you're kidding me, right?
No. How much are they How much do most people get for anger management? Do you know, in the courts these days?
Well, first of all, anger management, an abuser can manage his anger. He doesn't hit his boss. He doesn't hit the policeman. He can manage his anger. So that's not the issue at all. What the one resource that we do have is batterers intervention and prevention. And unfortunately, that's mostly court ordered, because most guys don't think, oh, hey, I've got a problem. I'm hurting my wife and I'm destroying my life. So most of it is court ordered. And how many times depends on if he can change it all, if he wants to change it all. Sometimes people say, well, if he would just quit drinking. We know that the abuse can actually elevate when somebody quits drinking because they don't have that crutch anymore. But the programs are anywhere between 18 and 24 weeks of batter's intervention. And again, he can walk the walk and talk the talk and still come home and smack her around. If you think about it, if I steal a car, I don't get to go to group support and talk about, gosh, how it felt when I stole the car, or what it was like growing up having no car or something like that. I'm just tougher than that. I'm like, you break her nose, you go to jail. You hold a gun to her head, you go to jail. And I think until we do that, until there is a stronger hand in the intervention, why would he stop? It's working for him, right? He gets dinner when he wants. He has sex when he wants it. He has it the way he wants it. Everything is working for him. Why would he want to change?
Right. Yeah. Do you want to ask her about Snowvid and what happened and how they got their money during, we call it Snowvid.
Yeah, during Snowvid. So tell us what you had some, because I can't even talk tonight.
Well, it's because I'm not letting you,
Yeah.
baby. You're
So
not
y'all had
exercising
some
that
issues
voice.
with the
Sorry.
facilities during all the snow and the ice and everything. So
did.
what happened, and tell us the outcome there.
Yeah, we started out with power outages, and which is really scary for us because the locks on our doors, I almost hate to say this out loud, but the locks on our doors are electric, and so, or magnetic. And so when we're out without power, our doors are kind of flapping in the breeze. And so we were struggling with that, no heat, the gas stove couldn't light because the pilot is electric, and I mean, just on and on, one thing after another. So we're passing out blankets, and we're passing out flashlights, and we're passing out extra coats and stuff, and everything is going okay. We would get some power back on and then back off again. But then all of a sudden in our transitional housing, the fire suppression unit system, actually the pipes froze and burst. And so everything was ruined. The roof, the ceiling, the insulation, the walls, the flooring, everybody's things were destroyed. All her clothes, all her, the kids' Christmas toys, all the food had to be thrown out because it was, without electricity in their refrigerators. And it was just nasty. It was just nasty. So, we do have insurance, but we also know that insurance pays exactly what's damaged, and whether that fits in with the rest of what's going on, is another story. But we went online and do what we typically do, is ask the community to help us. That we've experienced in the first time in 35 years, we had to close the doors of Genesis, and could they help? Well, I have to tell you, we were blessed beyond imagination. Not only was it shared locally, it ended up being shared nationally and internationally, that, this football player would energize his followers, and all of a sudden we're getting checks and donations. And we had Amazon wish lists, and we had, 2 trucks a day delivering food, non-perishable food that had to have been thrown out, new clothes, new night shirts for the kids, everything, toys, everything. People were so incredibly generous, and they were incredibly generous financially. And some of those gifts were everywhere from $100,000 down to $7. This one donation that I love was a man who said, I only have this $7, but I want you to have it because when I was little, I went to a place, and I think he was in Kansas. I went to a place like Genesis. We had a donation from social workers at a shelter in New York City who said, we stand with you in solidarity. And then, and it's everything in between. U.S. Congresswoman Tlaib actually heard about it. It was picked up by the Washington Post, then it was picked up by ABC Nightly News, and then it just went berserk. Yeah. But I got a call that said basically, hey, I'm with this foundation, and if we give you money, we'd like to, but if we give you money, it's probably going to be high press, and you're going to have to follow certain protocols. And I'm like, who the heck is this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the Archwell Foundation, which is run by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And they decided they wanted to help somebody in the United States. They're in California, but that they would like to pay for a roof. the damaged roof. And so they literally, starting next Monday, will be putting a roof over the heads of our clients that have had to run now away in the night twice to get to safety. But the foundation called the other night and said, we want to just visit with you. We can't talk about how much it was, but it was a very nice gift. And but we just want to talk about, International Day of the Woman and what their hopes were. And then while I'm there, and I barely made that call, I think it was a Sunday afternoon, but they were very particular that they wanted to meet on that day. So I'm zooming away, and I've got grandkids with me, and they're crawling all over me, and somebody's behind me in their PJs, and all of a sudden it kind of got fuzzy at the bottom of the screen, and two more people joined, Harry and Meghan. I nearly lost my marbles. I was just like, I didn't expect it. I got stupid really fast, right? I was kind of intimidated by my surroundings, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what do we call you? I don't even know what to say. And it's like, do I call you your highnesses or your royalties or your honors? What? And they started laughing, and they were just saying, just Harry and Meghan. And I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to do that. But anyway, we had a nice chat about why they picked us and how they heard about us, and, what else they'd like to do and what difference this was going to make. And of course, me, Michelle, that if you give me one donation, I'm going to ask you for another one. If you do a donation drive, I'm going to ask you to volunteer. And so while we had them on the phone, I invited them anytime they were ever in Texas, if they want to come see the difference they made at our transitional housing. And by the way, if it's in May and you'd like to ever be a keynote speaker at our luncheon, I just kind of sort of
threw that in too.
Yes, why not?
That would be great.
Yeah. I know. But anyway, we were very, very blessed by that gift, by all the gifts from $7 on up, and it will make a difference. We will be able to fix that facility and move our families back in.
And that is great. With that said, though, there's still a lot of needs, right? Yeah. Always ongoing. And I know that you have your luncheon coming up with, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm very excited. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year. And unfortunately, again, because of COVID, we have had to pivot to virtual, which is very difficult for the luncheon circuit because we can't have a pre-party for that donor. We can't have special seating for that donor and so on and so forth. But the community once again has stepped up, and we have our most amazing speaker is Octavia Spencer. And I don't know how familiar you are with all her films, but her courage, she has portrayed women who have been abused. And my favorite movie of hers is a movie, it went around to the independent movie film festivals. It's called Blues for Willa Dean. And she was the next door neighbor of a woman who just, well, spoiler alert, but she almost lost her life. And this guy was incredibly abusive. And how to be a friend. That's the theme of this luncheon this year. What can you do for your friend? And what can you say to that coworker? And, how do we keep domestic violence and women who survive it from becoming hidden figures, okay? Or, how much courage does it take? So many people love the book and the movie The Help, but and we always laugh about, the chocolate pie scene. But to be real honest, the courage that it would have taken, that movie was by white people for white people, but for a Black person in that position in the 50s, that if she had done that, she probably would have been hung and her house burned down with her children in it, and nobody would have said a thing. So we likened the courage of that, of stepping forward and saying, you cannot do this to me, you can't treat me this way, to what happens with victims of violence in these times now, how much courage it takes to do that, because literally that dragon can kill you and they can burn your house down with your children in it. And we see that.
They do, yeah.
Anyway, so we're super excited. There's still tickets, and because we're not in a ballroom, we can just keep on selling tickets. So if anybody would like to share that experience with us, it's on May 7th, and you can go to genesisshelter.org and find out information about how to be there with us on May the 7th. We're super excited about it.
Yes, and we are sponsors, and so we will be going.
Yep.
I don't know if you'll be going, but I've invited a table full, so yeah,
Good.
attending
may
on
not
Zoom.
be.
So,
You may not be
what
invited.
no, he'll do.
She told me I couldn't come.
No, I didn't.
You can
But
watch. Come
no,
on.
no,
You can
come on.
watch.
But one last thing. I wonder if you'll remember this. Do you remember? It may have changed. There was a book that you used to recommend. Do you still recommend that same book for people? Or
Not
no?
exactly.
Okay.
There is a book, I think is what you're talking about,
Okay.
is the verbally abusive relationship is that the one that
Yeah, I
helped,
think so.
or why does he do that? We still do that. Lundy Bancroft wrote, Why Does He Do That? And it helps a lot of women when they read that to know he does it because he can, and he does it because it works, and all the reasons that abusers would do that. Because she's in her mind thinking, wasn't I smart enough? Wasn't I pretty enough? Wasn't I thin enough or fat enough or whatever it was? We do recommend Why Does He Do That? But there was one book written by, I can't call the name, but it talks about how to define what is verbal abuse. We all argue and pick at each other, right? But when does it become verbally abusive, emotionally abusive? And the first half of the book is very clear on defining that. The second half is a little bit brave, that there are ways of saying and not saying things that can get someone hurt even worse. So,
Yeah, I was interested in, I think, both of those, but I think it is the second one. I'll find it. I'll just do a search on that. And
go online. We have lots of resources on our website. We've got how to help a friend, how to safety plan, how to talk to teens about this issue. I encourage everybody, if you need help, somebody that needs help, or you want to help us, go to genesisshelter.org. And let's do this together. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to give out that number. It's so good to thank you for coming on, and thank you for telling us so much about this just always important topic. And the 24-hour hotline, do I have the number right? 214-946 free 4357. Is that okay? So
3457 is help. Basically. 946 help is what you remember, and our website is genesisshelter.org.
And so thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. I know what a busy woman you are. And I wanted to, at the last minute, I just did want to say, you guys, if you want to watch a really cool video, watch Jan receive her award from Laura Bush.
I was a nervous wreck.
It was
so
cool.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was a nervous wreck.
And it was kind of funny. They have these nicknames for you, and they were putting these cute little, so you guys are closer than you're letting on, because it was really cool. So, but thank you so much. It was good to see you, and I appreciate you so much. And thank everybody for listening. You can find us on all your podcast platforms, your favorite podcast platforms, here on SoulWhat Facebook page, and on Michelle Soultopia YouTube. And thanks for listening, where we talk about matters that are important to our soul, and you get to discern and decide what's important to yours. Thanks for listening.